So, good evening to everyone, and I would like to wish all the people who are in this webinar the best of health, happiness, and joy in the new year. And I would like to extend this to them and their families as well. I'm thankful to Dr. Sabu for having given me another opportunity to speak on a topic which I feel has got very special relevance to the present as well as the future generations of our country. Today's topic is about ice-covered Arctic region of our Earth. We all have learned during school that Arctic and Antarctic regions, which remain covered by ice throughout the year and almost inaccessible for anyone to reach there by some safe mode of transportation. During the school, we studied about the climate there, as I mentioned, inaccessibility, and the sparse population of people and polar animals which were staying in both North Pole as well as South Pole. I don't think during my days in the school, and maybe many of you who are in the audience would also agree with me, that the geography classes ever considered discussing what will happen if the ice reduces in Arctic or Antarctic. What will happen? I don't remember discussing this or the teacher telling about this in school. And this is actually sort of happening now. So we need to look at this phenomenon of polar ice melting and how it's going to affect us. But today's talk is only about Arctic and not Antarctic. And in my discussion with you, I will be highlighting how this phenomenon, as the years go by, has got an impact on India's economy, India's security, and on the scientific front, what all impact can happen to us. Many of us may see this during our lifetime, but definitely our children will get to experience it during their lifetime. If you notice the title of my talk, I have intentionally included a word called forebode in the title. It is essentially to hint that there is a situation, a bad situation to come due to melting of ice. And I would attempt to highlight the various aspects in my presentation. I think I'll take about 40 to 45 minutes to cover this presentation. So with this, I will upload my presentation, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay.
So as I said, what does the melting Arctic ice forebode for India? So let us start discussing this issue. This is the Arctic region of our Earth. You can see a dotted line here. This dotted line has been drawn at 66.5 degrees latitude. So on the globe, if you draw a dotted line along the 66.5 degree latitude, it will look like this. And this area within this ring, within this circle, is called the Arctic region. It accounts for 4% of Earth's surface area. In this, within this circle, there is sea and there is land. The sea, which is the Arctic Ocean, which we have learned in social studies, is in the center. It covers around 14 million square kilometers, and it is almost 80+ percentage of the whole Arctic region within the circle. And it is surrounded by land of different countries around it. So there are 8 countries around it. We'll come into the details a little later. But I just want to highlight one aspect. If you see my second bullet, it says the sea, which covers around 84% of this Arctic region, has 1/3 its area underlain by continental shelf. Many of you may not be knowing what is continental shelf. So I'll just take a minute. See, you're on land now. When it goes to the coast sea, the water level is higher than the land. And after some time, the land starts dropping and it is only water. But there are certain areas in our earth where the land extends under the sea almost at the same level as the territory, land territory. Slightly lower, it extends. Or it drops very, very slow. It is actually an extension of our land into the sea, but remains below the sea. And that is called continental shelf. Because when Earth was formed by movement of the tectonic plates, this had happened. And some places you have this sort of structure in our land submerged underwater. This is too much of geography, you may feel, but this has got a relevance. If your country has got continental shelf, then the EZ is much larger than a country which does not have continental shelf. EZ, I'm sure all of you know, exclusive economic zone. If EZ is 200 miles for a non-continental shelf, it is 350 miles for those coastlines which have got continental shelf. So just keep this factor in mind. This aspect is what the UN body has decided. It is not fully approved yet, but it is likely to come very soon. And India will also hugely benefit if this approval is given, because then we will have more area for our economic resources which are lying in the sea. Okay. Now, there are about 40 lakhs people staying within this circle. 40 lakhs or 4 million. And the biggest city within this circle is a city called Murmansk, which is in Russia. I've shown the arrow there. So that's about Arctic region. We are covered. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see what's the climate. The Arctic region climate is influenced by sea ice and glacier. Both are ice only. But there is a difference in their terminology. If the ice is on top of the sea, it's called sea ice. Glaciers are on top of land. Like we have glaciers in Himalayas. But if ice freezes in Arctic or in Antarctic, it's called sea ice, if it is on water. So this is a difference which I want you to highlight to you. But how this ice is formed and glaciers are formed and how they remain so is through a process, a climatological process. Because our Earth is inclined about its axis, sun rays don't reach the pole throughout the year. You and me get sun every day. Monday to Sunday we get sun. But if you are in Arctic region, you don't get sun for many days. For weeks on, you don't get sun. It again depends on where you are in the latitude. So we're not discussing that now. But because the sun's rays are falling less, there's less heating. There's absence of sunlight. One reason. Second reason is, whenever sun rays come, which will happen when Earth is going around in revolution, the next set of 6 months, the reflection will take place of sun rays and go away. So both these factors cause sustenance of sea ice and glacier. Now, in summer months, I will come to what is summer months and winter months. In summer months, sunlight is available for more number of hours, and ice starts melting little by little. And it will continue during the months of summer months when sun's rays are going to fall by a small amount. The average duration of summer is 3 months, June, July, August in Arctic. And 9 months it is winter. In winter it is minus 40 degrees average and 10 degrees plus 10 degrees during summer. If you go closer and closer to North Pole, it will become even worse. The temperature will become more severe. But I'm just telling you the average temperature, just for you to get a feel of what the climate is like. In winter, sea ice and glaciers build up. They become thicker, 3 meters, 4 meters big ice blocks are formed during winter. While in summer, they gradually melt and merge with seawater. This happens every summer, it happens. But by winter, again, they'll build up. So you have a process of some melting taking place, but in winter, it gets accumulated again. So this has been going on for thousands of years. And there's been a balance in this because of the atmospheric temperature, the sun's rays falling at some periodicity, etc. And it's very stable, at least till 1980 and things like that. After that, people started seeing changes. I'll come to that a little later. Just a comparison with Antarctic. Antarctic temperatures are more severe and melting of ice is less. Antarctic also ice melts during summer months. Their summer months are different from the summer months of Arctic because they're in southern hemisphere and Arctic is in northern hemisphere. But Antarctic temperatures are more severe and melting is less. So today, we are more worried about Arctic because the melting is more. And Antarctic, they're not so much worried about. Let's see. This is a satellite picture of Antarctic and Arctic. What you see in white is ice or glacier. Antarctic, obviously, you can see it's a big area covered with white, and Arctic, it is less. Antarctic, there's a difference between Antarctic and Arctic. Antarctic is land surrounded by sea. So within this white area where it is full of ice, there are mountains which are covered with glaciers, just like Himalayas, almost as high as some of the mountains there. But the sea is all around this land. There are no countries in Antarctic. There are no permanent population, no one. People may go visit for some research and scientific expedition, but otherwise, Antarctic belongs to no one. Antarctic region has no ownership. But Arctic, as I told you earlier, at the dotted line which I drew, there are 8 countries having land in Arctic. 8 different countries. And another difference is, it is sea in the center, surrounded by land. Now, this is a huge difference, because when you have land, there's population. When there is population, there is human activity. When there's human activity, there is always some heat which is generated due to either industrial activity, economic activity, etc. And you will find the warming up is more. One of the reasons why Arctic is getting warmer than Antarctic is because of the land all around, which has got, as such, land heats up the place faster. On top of it, you have the population. You see the population in Arctic, as I told you, it's 4 million or 40 lakhs, while there's nobody in Antarctic. Okay, let's go forward. Again, coming back to a similar diagram, but here I've shown the 8 countries are there. The list is there. You can just go through the list. There are small countries like Iceland. There are big countries like Russia. 50% of the land within the circle is Russia. 50% of population is also Russia. There's some USA, there's Canada, there's etc. Okay. Now, how is the governance taking place in Arctic? Because in Antarctic, as I told you, there is no territory of any country, so there is no governance model. But there is an international treaty saying that we will not do militarization, we will not do any industrial activity. All these things are there. So Antarctic is fairly well looked after by our human population staying outside, as well as by the various countries. Now let's look at what's Arctic. Every country, I told you there are 8 countries, they look after their own respective territories. And there are some common issues in that area. I shall come to that. Few countries have got overlapping territorial claim. Now this is where the continental shelf is coming. You have continental shelf of Canada coming under the sea. You have continental shelf of Russia also coming under the sea. But there isn't enough space for earmarking the 350 miles for each of them. So there are overlapping taking place. And there are contests between 2 of this, saying this is my land, it is my area, this is my EEZ. Whatever is here, it belongs to me. So in Arctic, there are such problems. Huge number of problems amongst many countries. At least about 4 or 5 of them have got territorial problems, which are not yet resolved. And there's an undersea mountain also, which has made this territory boundary to be adjudicated at the UN level. I told you in Antarctica, there's an international treaty to protect the environment. In Arctic, there is no treaty. Every country looks after its territory, and there is enough freedom for each country to utilize its territory the way it wants. Just like they have the freedom to use economic activity, industrial activity, whatever is possible. But they have formed the Arctic Council in 1996 to address common issues by the 8 countries. There are issues of climate, there are issues of type of vessels which can operate, the fisheries which can take place, the scientific expeditions which can take place, etc., etc. So there's an Arctic Council which addresses these common issues. And the Arctic Council is not only by these 8 countries. There are some observer states in that. India is one of them. India, and of course China also, from 2013 are both in the Arctic Council as observers. They can participate in discussion, they can share their views, and India has a fair amount of experience in dealing with glaciers and things like that, because we have in Himalayas. So on scientific front, on research front, we are able to share some valuable knowledge with the other states who are a member of Arctic Council. But just remember, Arctic Council has got 8 countries and 13 observers. What are the natural resources there? I'm telling you the important ones: oil, natural gas, and minerals. They're rich in these deposits. That is why countries are fighting for their EEZ boundary, because there is oil and natural gas, and of course minerals. We talked about it in the last talk. It is also equally important now. USA has estimated that 13% of world's oil and 30% of gas is in this region. So it's a very rich area for oil and gas. That is why there's a big rush towards Arctic by those 8 countries to make sure they're able to exploit that area for oil and gas. Russia, which I told you has almost 50% of the area within that circle, is already extracting a lot of oil and gas, which has come to 15% of its GDP today. Today, Russia's GDP, 15% is coming from Arctic. And if you are buying Russian oil for our country, some of it are coming from Arctic, subject to that they are able to transport it from there to outside. We'll touch upon that aspect soon. And there are mineral deposits of various types, but mining is a bit of a problem in ice-covered area. So scientific research is going on how we can do it. So far, it is more on oil and gas and less on minerals. Now, transporting an item from Arctic is a problem. How do you transport? By land, you cannot much, because all covered with ice. You can transport large quantities only by ships, but those ship routes are open only for a few weeks in a year. So you can take out from there only when the sea has become slightly devoid of ice. Then only it is open, ship can move. Now, for Russia, of course, has laid a lot of pipelines for the oil and the gas to go, which they have laid. So they are able to send it throughout the year through the pipelines which they have laid towards their territory. I am talking about taking away the item from that place to another place. Why ships? That is a problem. Now, this is a map. You see a red line and you see a green line. The red line is a shipping route along Canada, USA, that is Alaska, and Canada. The green line is along Russia, and it comes down to Norway. Sorry. So these two routes open up during summer months, and ships can ply. They can cut across from Pacific Ocean to Atlantic Ocean through a shortcut, but only during those summer months. The Northern Sea Route, which I will call as NSR from now onwards, which is the green line, is less affected than the red line. And today it is open for about 2.5 months. People feel by 2040, for 4 months it will be open because more ice would have melted and the sea may be navigable by ships. Of course, ships will still require icebreaker ships to accompany them in case they encounter large blocks of floating ice and thereby preventing them to move forward. So just remember, the Arctic route, which is along Russia, called the Northern Sea Route or NSR, is open for 2-3 months in a year. and it is a short journey from Pacific to Atlantic. Otherwise, it will go through roundabout routes. Now, take the example of China. I've shown here China, a place called Dalian. The red line is what the ships normally use. It goes via Middle East, Suez Canal, does that accident, reach Rotterdam in Netherlands. But if you use NSR, you come through this blue line. It is 4,000 miles less, and it takes less time. I'm just giving an example. It is applicable for China, it is applicable for Japan, it's applicable for Korea, it's applicable for Russia also. If they use NSR, they save time, they save energy, they reduce cost of transportation. So there's an attraction for these countries. Remember, Russia, China, Japan, Korea, etc. If the Arctic can open up, then they can utilize it and they will have advantage in trade, less cost, and therefore their economy will prosper. It's a huge advantage. If you go via Suez Canal, you have to pay some fees there. Or if you're coming via Pacific, you have to pay fees in Panama Canal. So here you don't have to pay all that. You may remember March 2021, Suez Canal was blocked for 7 days by a ship which got jammed within the canal. So those sort of problems are not expected in the Arctic route. If they open up for 4 months, after some time 5 months, like that, if they open up, then the countries which are possible to use that route, the blue color, they will benefit. India doesn't have any benefit. You see the map. The blue route is of no interest to India. But others will utilize it and they will take over trade. They will have more exports. Our exports will get hit. You understand? So we'll go more into this issue a little later. If Arctic route materializes by extensive melting of ice, as I told you, many of these countries will benefit, which are easily open to using Northern Sea route. As I told you, no advantage to India. But if Arctic Sea route is not open, if the Arctic Sea route does not open because of ice not melting, then there are huge benefits to the globe, various countries, including India. So at this point of time in our discussion, I am saying Arctic ice should not melt. But some other countries, they don't mind if it melts. For us, Arctic ice should not melt. And one of the disadvantages I've already pointed out, and more will come as we go along. Now you look at this map, satellite picture. The yellow line is what the cover of ice in 1979, let's say 80, for more than 42 years back. Today, the ice cover is less than the white area, white patch. But this white patch of 2012, it has shrunk, and it is estimated there's a reduction of 4.5% of area every 10 years. So within 200 plus years, all the ice will go. If that goes at this rate, should it happen? If it happens, obviously Arctic Sea route ships can ply, but what are the other problems you will face? How will this affect India? That is our question. That is the point of discussion. I've highlighted to you, in the international community, some countries benefit by this and they may be looking forward for that. While we don't benefit by this Arctic sea route, but we lose out on some other areas. I'm going to cover those points in the subsequent slides. Okay, now I have to take you back to social studies for some time. Just bear with me. It's a very interesting concept, but I will slowly explain this. You see there's a red belt and a blue belt. A red belt and blue belt show the ocean currents. Some currents are on the surface of the ocean. Some currents are below the surface. Some currents are below the surface. And this, scientists have explained that it is called the ocean conveyor belt. Like a conveyor belt moves in the airport with your luggage, just like that, warm water and cold water go around the world very slowly, of course. They go and they move in a particular direction as shown in this diagram, in this image. The direction depends on wind pattern, Earth's rotation, and the differences in water temperature, salinity, etc., etc. Okay, but this is how the Earth was born, and it has been working from now. Nobody has come and changed it. It has been working for thousands and thousands of years. This belt has been moving, and warm water has been going along the red, and cold water moves along the blue. Now, warm water, which is from tropical area like in India, are warmer because we are in tropical area, water is warmer, less salty, and therefore lighter. Just remember this. The water in tropical areas is warmer and less salty, and therefore it is lighter. But the water closer to poles, closer to Arctic region, are colder, more salty, and heavier. So the heavy water, and I said heavy water, I mean heavier water, the polar water actually sinks while the tropical water remains on the surface. So the red belt moves on the top, on the surface of the ocean, while the blue belt is below the surface of the ocean. It moves. So it goes on top, and then when it returns, it comes as blue. Let's see how it works. So when red belt, or when warm water goes towards the poles, we are discussing Arctic, therefore North Pole, it reaches there, and this reaching is because of Earth's rotation and wind and differences between temperature, etc. When it reaches there, it becomes cold. So it releases the heat to atmosphere, becomes cold water, and it sinks. So more warm water flows, that also sinks. More water flows again, and that also sinks. And the cold water starts returning towards Antarctica. While this is very slow moving conveyor belt, warm waters keep the temperature in Europe as very moderate. And similarly for us in tropical, when it comes back as cold water under the sea, it is not that hot in tropical. So it is moderating the climate all over the world. And that's how it has been working for thousands of years. Now, what happens is, this delicately balanced cycle of warm and cold water is moderated the climate in tropical as well as polar regions. I want to tell you, the cycle time scientists have estimated to be 1,000 years. That means you take a quantity of water, start from one point in the conveyor belt, and see the speed with which it moves, and then take the total distance it has to go around and come back, it will take 1,000 years for it to come back to the same point. So this is a very slow moving conveyor belt and has been very effectively moderating the climate of tropical region, polar region, and there has been a steady pattern of climate for us in India. We're talking about India mostly. So there's a steady pattern of climate over the years. Now, what happens if more Arctic ice melts? When more Arctic ice melts, the Arctic ice melting more is because of carbon emission, temperature going up, global warming, etc. That has got nothing to do with this conveyor belt. But when more Arctic ice melts, it becomes water. And that water is added to sea. When that water is added to sea in the Arctic, it becomes less salty. It becomes less dense. So let me repeat this once more. When the Arctic ice melts due to global warming, which is caused by carbon emission, which is caused by unfettered use of fossil fuel by all countries. So when the ice melts to fresh water, the Arctic water becomes less salty and less dense. When it becomes less dense, it does not go down that fast. It goes down, but goes down slowly. When it goes down slowly, the warm water is not able to rush in because the cold water is not moved down. So warm water is not able to go in. So you have a plumbing problem that the cold water does not sink fast enough for the warm water to go from the tropics. Now what happens? Warm water is only slowly going. The conveyor has become slower. I won't say as it takes 1,000 years, now it has become more slow. And therefore, tropical seas, they are getting overheated. They become warmer because it's not moved away to Arctic. Because that is not, because ice has diluted that and that is not sinking. So therefore, tropical water becomes warmer. When tropical water becomes warmer, very simple. Now we're going to talk about India. Leave out Arctic. We have understood that if Arctic ice melts, tropical sea will become warmer because warm water is not able to go via the conveyor belt. So when tropical water becomes warmer, there is more evaporation. When there's more evaporation, more rain-bearing clouds. This has started upsetting Indian monsoon. Indian monsoon, which had a steady pattern for hundreds of years, for many decades of years, you and me have experienced it. But in the last 10, 12 years, let's say 10 years, it has started becoming slightly erratic. You will have heavy rain in some places and very low rain in some other places. So the pattern of Indian monsoon is getting affected by the Arctic ice melting. So I hope you have understood the linkage between Indian monsoon and the Arctic ice melting. And Arctic ice melting is because of global warming. So what do we do? How do we make sure that our monsoon doesn't get affected? If Indian monsoon is affected, it affects. There are many natural disasters which will happen. It affects agriculture. It affects economy. So many things happen. But the cost for this change in the monsoon pattern is because of Arctic ice, which is caused by global warming. So you have to attack global warming and make sure global warming is controlled. So we are concluding like that in this particular slide, and then we'll go further. So Government of India has embarked on many programs to control carbon emission and study the trend in melting of ice. Now, I'm not going to go into the programs to control carbon emission, because it's another topic. But you all know we are gone for renewable energy, solar, windmills, and green hydrogen, and so many things which we have done. So we will not enter there, but we look at what are they doing to study the trend of melting of Arctic ice. First is they formed a new National Center for Polar and Ocean Research in 1998. They formed it to do all the studies. They set up a research station in Arctic, in a place called Svalbard in Norway, which is manned for 6 months in a year. 6 months it is closed down. I'll show you a photograph of that. This is how it looks. This is open for 6 months. It's called Himadri. It operates. Scientists operate from there. They do a lot of work, and then they come back after 6 months. India applied for observer status. We got it in 2013. India has installed in 2014 an underwater laboratory. Very interesting. It's called IndARC, Indian in Arctic. IndARC, somewhere near an island in Svalbard. And that underwater laboratory is 192 meters below the sea surface to study temperature, salinity, density, and various issues. We talked about it very briefly about salinity, temperature, density, etc. But there is an underwater laboratory which India has installed. And how does it remain underwater for 192? There is a technique called mooring, by which it is anchored down with wires and anchors, etc. And it remains there. From there, the data comes to the island, a nearby island, and from there it comes back to the laboratory for further analysis. India, of course, took many expeditions to Arctic. We don't have a polar research vessel yet. There's a chance that we may have it in 4 or 5 years, but we have been hiring ships and going. Now I'm going to show you something interesting. India deposited Thurdal, Thoraparip, as they call it in Malayalam, in 2014 in a global seed vault at Svalbard. You know, there is a global seed vault where seeds of all types, rice, wheat, millet, bajra, dals, etc., samples are kept inside a mountain in this Norwegian city, inside the mountain. I'll show you a photo where it looks like this. It is going inside the mountain, and all the samples are taken to this place after they are fully checked out that they don't have any viruses or bacteria, etc. Then they are taken inside and stored there. And it extends into the vault, into the mountain. It's about 150 meters deep inside the mountain. I mean, it goes inside the mountain. And all countries are doing it. More than 100 plus countries are deposited their items there. And India has also done it in 2014. We have deposited Thurdal, as I told you. So many of you may not be knowing there's a global seed vault in Norway. And India has also gotten a collaboration with NASA by our ISRO for solid satellite monitoring of ice. I showed you some photographs of ice coverage and etc. India has joined this NASA group so that we are also able to get this data from our satellite. And we issued a policy document in March 22, 10 months back. I'll be discussing this policy document and its contents in another 10 minutes. So let's go forward. Now, what is Russia's stance on Arctic ice? I don't require to explain. Russia is already benefiting a lot. Obviously, they want more and more oil and gas to come, more and more ships to ply, etc. So they are keen on opening the Arctic route for shipping, which means they don't mind if the ice melts. But I will just quickly run through the slide. Russia has got 50% area, 50% population. They have been using their oil and gas. They got some disputes on territory. And they have said, NSR, I will give a icebreaker whenever anybody wants. I will help the ship to go. They did that when the ship Ever Given blocked Suez Canal. China and Russia have joined hands and created a lot of infrastructure for oil, rigs, energy extraction, setting up ports, common research centers. China, almost to the extent of about $60 billion, have been invested along with Russia. Russia didn't have that much money, but China has invested to make sure that Arctic, we are ready to completely have a dominant position, power position, when the ice melts significantly. Indirectly, they don't mind if the ice melts. They don't have a naval base, but they'll have very soon. They issued some joint statements with China, how to develop Arctic, etc. Of course, the word sustainable is always there. USA, a very safe approach. They said we should protect the region. We should make sure the melting of ice, it may happen because of global warming, but we should have it calibrated. They should be peaceful, stable. So they are making a very safe line. And they have also issued some strategy documents. They have some partnership with Canada. And they have issued October 22, 3 months back, they issued a document saying US will look after Arctic region for security, climate change, development, sustainable development, and international cooperation. So I talked about Russia. I talked about USA. So let me have a word. What is China saying? China says they issued a white paper in 2018. And look at its four key principles: understand, protect, develop, and participate. Very aggressive. They want to understand, that's fine, you're studying. Then they'll say, I will protect. Then I will develop, and I will participate in governance of Arctic. So their statement itself is a little aggressive. They want to play a dominant position, a dominant role, I mean, in the Arctic. They don't mind using the Arctic shipping route because hugely economical for them, for their trade. They don't have to go via Indian Ocean. They can go directly towards Europe. They can directly go to USA for their trade, etc. They save a lot of money expenditure on that. They have huge investments in Iceland. They have joint scientific expeditions with Greenland. They have laid underwater sea cables, satellite tracking centers, many laboratories. All this they have invested. And as I told you earlier, they have invested about $60 billion in Russia. But if you include Iceland, Greenland, Canada, everything, it comes to $90 billion they've invested in Arctic to make sure Arctic gets developed. Obviously, they have some ambition about what role they will play once Arctic becomes less ice prone. And they have advocated the cooperation between Arctic and non-Arctic states should be there in all fields for mutual benefit. See that word, for mutual benefit. That means China also benefits, Arctic nation also benefits. That means they will participate in oil exploration, they will do in mineral extraction, they will do in gas extraction, and of course they will have some benefit out of that, economic value. And suo moto, they have said we are a near Arctic state. We are almost there. We are almost Arctic state now because of the huge investment, a lot of agreements and contracts with the various countries there, mostly with Russia, some with Greenland and Finland, etc. So China is already aspiring to be a player, a prominent player in Arctic. Obviously, he doesn't mind Arctic route of shipping. So what is India's Arctic policy? So from climate issues, it has slowly taken a geopolitical issue for India now, with China trying to play a dominant role there. I'll quickly go through this Indian Arctic policy. It was issued in March 22. India has always been associated with Arctic from 1920, even before independence. Britain had nominated us to be a part of that treaty, which has given us some free visa access and conduct of economic and commercial activities. So India has got some open access to the Arctic region because we are a party of 1920 treaty. I'll just show the photograph of 1920 treaty. All these countries in green have signed this treaty, including India, which was the British colony then. So they all have access to Arctic region for scientific studies and other commercial activities. And India has said that they have created so many research stations there, as I told you earlier. But India also argues that whatever is happening in Arctic can happen in Himalayas. Global warming is there in Arctic. Global warming is there in Himalayas also. Ice will melt in Arctic. Ice can melt in Himalaya also. So they have already started calling Himalayas as the third pole of the Earth. North Pole, South Pole are the two poles. The third pole is Himalayas. And the glaciers and the snowfields, they have lots of water there. If they melt, they'll come to the 10 rivers which are carrying this water to sea, of course. There will be repercussions on additional water coming in, flooding will take place, sea water will rise. So studies in Arctic will help us to understand the Himalayan problem. And of course, the common issue is still global warming. And therefore, India has got a bigger role to play on the scientific front as far as Arctic is concerned, because we can utilize some of the conclusions, some of the findings of the research, what we can do in Himalayas, which are also having a similar phenomenon of global warming affecting the glaciers. As I told you earlier, in Himalayas, we've got glaciers because it's on land. Water is ice. Okay, so let's come to the next part of it. This document is available on the net. So those of you who are interested in reading more about what all India is planning to do on climate control and exploitation of natural resources, etc., is all covered there. But India has come up with another proposal. Don't use the Arctic Sea route. Don't allow the ice to melt is one issue. Don't use the Arctic Sea route. I will suggest another route, which is a combination of sea plus land and rail. Rail is again on land to reach the western side. I will show you this. It's called International Surface Transport Corridor. They said this is an alternative to Suez Canal. It's also an economic, environmental friendly alternative to Arctic shipping. So many countries through which this route goes, I'll show the map, will benefit, and they will not have to go through a long route via Mediterranean, Suez Canal, etc. I mean, their ships don't have to go. So the route looks like this. The traditional route is blue. India has said, let's have sea up to Chabar. From Chabar port, you go via rail, then you go across Caspian Sea by ship and again by rail. So they have established a study, feasibility of this study. It will save cost by 30%. If you have to go via the blue to St. Petersburg and Moscow and other parts of Europe, then you will spend 30% more as compared to what you will incur via Suez Canal. And all these countries which are on this red route will also benefit. Their trade also can go from India. They can also go from other countries which have got access to the Iranian port. And the first container movement from India to Moscow has gone and come in July 22. So they have established the feasibility of this route as an alternative to the blue route, and as also an alternative to the Arctic route. So India is trying to convey, don't be in a hurry to establish Arctic routes by ships. Try to make sure the ice doesn't melt. I have got another route which I've already tried out, which can be expanded and exploited by many countries which are in the Central Asian Republic. Now, is of course, it has to have global acceptance to make sure this works. So government is also encouraging our Indian companies to participate. As I told you, as per the 1920 treaty, we have got open access to Arctic region for both research, scientific, as well as commercial activities. So we are trying to get into Arctic Economic Council, Economic Forum in a bigger way. And India wants to ensure that there is more global cooperation in preventing or checking the global warming so that other parts of the world don't get affected in their climate. Classic example is we ourselves. Our monsoon will get affected, and India is trying to get more global cooperation. And I think the G20 presidency, which has come to Indian Prime Minister now, has come at the most appropriate time when we are able to share these issues with many other countries of G20, and we are able to get a higher level of global cooperation to make sure that Arctic does not have overdevelopment and thereby threaten its environment, which can cause more melting of ice. So what are the worrisome factors which you have talked about till now? Arctic ice, if it melts, adversely impacts Indian monsoon. I've already explained this. It will affect our agriculture. It will cause flooding in many places. We already started experiencing it in many places. There'll be a rise in sea level along the Indian coast due to Arctic ice melting, as well as due to Himalayan ice melting. And seawater expands in higher temperature. So roughly, if the seawater goes up by 1 foot, 100 feet of land will go underwater. Very roughly, 1:100. This is what most of the countries have the coastline correspond to this, but it again depends on continental shelf and other things. But just remember, 1:100 is the ratio by which you lose land. So it threatens population, threatens cities, infrastructure. Indian economy is agrarian by nature. It'll get affected. And if monsoon is erratic, we may have food shortage after a couple of decades. We may have unemployment in the agrarian sector. So we need to be really worried about the changing patterns of monsoon and to make sure this does not affect our agriculture. You have to change your crops based on the shift which is going to happen, even though it may be erratic in the monsoon. Arctic routes, if they open, they will help China. China will become more powerful than what it is today. So it's an issue. You have a neighbor who's powerful today, he'll become more powerful economically because the Arctic route gives huge savings to him in its trade. Arctic routes may become a reality. Many people say in 20 years or so, because by 2040, they say it will open for 4 months. It will spare China of taking the Indian Ocean route. And I'll spend a minute on this. I'll go to the map. Today, China takes a red route. It goes via Mediterranean, Suez Canal, Indian Ocean, and then it comes to Andaman Sea. And here it goes very close through Malacca Straits. So all the oil for China, all the trade for China, in, out, everything goes through this small Malacca Straits. And thereafter, it's very close to Andaman Sea, where India can have a good watch on the type of traffic which goes and can cause some maritime threat to them. So it's a strategic advantage to India if China follows a red line. But if NSR becomes open, they will not come via red, they'll go via blue. So we have a situation that if Arctic Sea route gets developed, China not only becomes powerful, it'll also be free of this threat, perceived threat from India on the maritime front near Malacca Straits. So it'll weaken whatever strategy you had in mind all these years, saying how to tackle China. Now you will find the Chinese trade, Chinese oil flow, etc. will take some other route, and you will not be having any dominance on that route because it is going through Andaman Sea. Right. Now, as I told you, China as a near Arctic state is already trying to do it, and it is trying to become stronger through Arctic shipping and also reduce its vulnerability in Indian Ocean. So I come to my last slide, conclusions. Arctic ice melting has progressed at 4.5% per decade. It's significantly come to around 18 to 20% less already. So at this rate, very serious, grave, adverse situations can emerge in the Arctic ice. And Indian monsoon will get affected. I told you about the ocean belt, conveyor belt, how warm water will move slow in Indian tropical waters. It'll get overheated, more evaporation, more rain, more flood. This is bound to happen. So we have to make sure the ice does not melt in Arctic. Agriculture will get affected, I told you. Arctic shipping will empower and strengthen China. We talked about India's proposal for the surface corridor from Iran towards Central Asian Republic and towards Russia. Its trials are over, but requires more global acceptance so that we are able to give alternatives to the roundabout route through Suez Canal, and at the same time, the non-friendly status of, environmental friendly status of the Arctic route. So we are able to argue it out with the international community. So the only way you can control this is reduce Arctic ice melting, control it. And the only solution is climate control. Reduce your carbon emission. If you reduce your carbon emission, not only you, all the countries reduce their carbon emission, Arctic ice melting will slow down. Arctic ice will not open up shipping. And all the other factors which I told you on economic front, strategic front, and as well as also scientific front will be not an adverse situation for India. So Arctic, maybe 8,500 kilometers from here. It is 8,500 kilometers from India to Arctic. Depends where you want to go to Arctic. It could be even 9,000 kilometers. It is not just a geographical location. The amount of ice in Arctic controls the rain in India. So it is got a strategic domination. It is a controller of our climatology in our subcontinent. We need to be aware of this, and we should make sure that this does not become worse in the coming years and for our subsequent generations. And the only way you can do is reduce carbon emission. a topic which requires more discussion on another day. But today, the takeaway is Arctic ice can cause problems for us. And the only way you can tackle it is by reducing carbon emission. With this, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.